Hello and welcome, and happy Women's Day to all the women. Thank you for joining us on Business Incorporated. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. On the show today, Business Incorporated joins the rest of the world to celebrate women as we discuss African women in business. And women entrepreneurs in South Africa recycle bottles to make gift boxes and fancy holders. Plus, South Africa's MTN swings to $279 million annual profit. Let's get the show started now. We're starting off with the markets, and here in Africa, only the Nigerian index was in the red at intraday trade, down 0.11%. South African JSE index was up 0.30%, and Egypt was up 0.48%. The market in Nairobi closed in the green on Wednesday. And in the Middle East, stock markets were mixed at intraday, with Saudi stocks leading the gains as concerns about a global trade war retreated. Saudi stocks traded up 1.09%, with banks and insurers the main upward drivers. Qatar stocks slipped 0.75%, with Doha Bank the worst performer in early trading, slumping 10% as the stock went ex-dividend. Abu Dhabi stocks gained 0.17%, with Dana Gas, one of the bottom movers, slipping 1.3%. Dubai stocks were down 0.77%. Markets in Europe hovered around the flat line in early trade as investors await the latest interest rate decision from the European Central Bank, and exercised caution given the threats of global trade tariffs. It's also the International Women's Day, and so we have Janelle Dumalone talking to us today. Hello, Janelle. Good afternoon. Happy Women's Day.
Happy Women's Day.
So on this International Women's Day, how are the issues affecting women in Germany's business, economy, and markets being highlighted? And are you women at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange getting together for a drink or so later in the day? Perhaps I could catch the next available flight to come celebrate with you.
Oh, you should definitely come down here, especially since, so far nobody has really invited me, which I find personally disappointing. So either that means I have to work on my people skills or there aren't enough women here. Maybe it's a combination. Because, the thing is, Germany is actually a strange country when it comes to gender studies. Now, the most powerful figure here in the country is Angela Merkel, the chancellor. She, of course, is a woman. At the same time, you have one of the biggest and most persistent wage gaps here. As a whole, the female workforce in Germany earns 22% less than their male counterparts, a fact that I personally find very depressing. Also because of income inequality that follows a woman throughout her whole life now. Of course, a lower income means a lower pension in the future, and the number of women facing poverty in old age has risen quite a bit in the last decade. Now, the good news here in Germany is that it's at least a learning society, and there's an active effort on the part of regulators to make sure that women get a fair shot. So just as an example, in 2016, a new law was introduced that compelled companies listed here on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange to make sure that 30% of supervisory board seats went to women. Now, fast forward to today, and that has indeed happened. A third of supervisory board seats in companies are occupied by women, but the picture looks a little bit different when you look at women in management. Now, women only occupy about 13% of seats in upper management, and that is an improvement on 10 years ago, where the number was a measly 0.5%. But, there's definitely more room to grow in that regard, and that's something that I would definitely drink to when the time comes.
Right. Sometimes I just kind of wonder what the world would look like without women. Anyway, that's the matter for another day. The ECB President, Mario Draghi, is expected to make an address there in Frankfurt in the next hour on rate decisions. Any idea on what other burning issues the ECB chief will touch on?
You know, today investors are mostly expecting a light touch from Mario Draghi. You know, the ECB, of course, has to be very careful what signals that it sends to markets just generally, and especially with all this talk of a looming trade war, there's some built-in volatility there. And, you know, let's face it, this is a man who has a lot on his mind already. So apart from the looming trade war, he has to also consider maybe the strong showing of anti-Euro, anti-establishment parties in Italian elections held recently. There's also the fact that the inflation goal of just below 2% has yet to be achieved. And so these things taken together mean that the ECB is going to apply a light touch, is going to tread lightly. At the same time, however, the voices of the hawks in the governing council, the ones that want to see a quicker end to stimulus. Now, they're getting quite loud, and investors will be looking for clues in the policy statement as to whether any concessions were made to these policy hawks. Now, there are also some other issues looming on the horizon that Draghi will probably be asked about today, like more complicated questions as to the supervisory role of the ECB when it comes to advising national banks within the Eurozone. And this is coming up because of the Latvian banking scandal. Remember that the central bank governor in Latvia, Ilmars Rimšēvičs, who was, by the way, also a member of the ECB's governing council, was ensnared in a corruption scandal. And at the same time, some of the country's national banks were also being targeted for money laundering investigations. So that's raised a few eyebrows and also a few questions as to whether the ECB should have a stronger hand in regulating national banks' activity. Now, the ECB president, after that, will also present growth forecasts and inflation forecasts. These are expected to be similar to the ones presented in December. So 2.3% growth this year, 1.9% in 29, and with inflation expected to hit 1.4% this year.
All right, and how are the markets generally holding up today as Trump's trade war remains a talking point on the political point?
It is definitely still a talking point, especially today, because there has been news that he might come out with a tariff proclamation. So in the afternoon in the United States, so evening here. But people don't really know if it's going to happen. It's not, his trade advisor, Peter Navarro, did say in a television interview on Wednesday that we can't expect an announcement. At the same time, there's nothing listed on the White House schedule. And there's also some reporting that the signing ceremony could spill over to tomorrow as the tariff proclamation document awaits legal clearance. So that sort of uncertainty has made for quite weak trading across European markets today as investors choose to hang fire. Looking at the bigger picture, however, investors are, of course, concerned that this tit-for-tat spiral could descend into a full-blown trade war where there's no obvious way out. There are, of course, dispute mechanisms within the World Trade Organization, but this might blow up to be a bigger mess than they can mediate. We have to consider the possibility that Donald Trump is using the argument of national security in order to circumvent trade laws. If he manages to do this successfully, then there is a big chance that national governments might actually whip out their own obscure national laws in a bid to get their own exemptions. And in that event, we could be looking at a free-for-all. So definitely a lot of cause for concern here on the markets with view to this looming trade war.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Janelle. In the meantime, enjoy this day.